Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before I get to our guests here, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Kerry Proctor on the podcast. She's coming to us all the way from Yorkshire in the UK, another one of our UK guests. She was a PCA first-timers, June 2019 toned figure and overall female champ. She's also a student nurse, but most importantly, she's our current guest. Kerry, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. No problem.
Absolutely. So why don't you give us, well, first of all, before you give us your backstory, why don't you tell us what the weather's like in the UK right now as we're speaking?
Well, we've had a few storms actually, which is a bit unusual, so it's not the best at the moment.
Honestly, though, when everyone thinks of England, I think we always have that view of where it's cloudy a lot because I don't know, that's what we always like to see
Yeah,
in movies.
it rains all the
But
time.
rains all the time. Well, it's yeah. So that's
Yeah,
another thing that
basically.
that's another thing. That's another I think English stereotype that is portrayed a lot. But why don't you give us a little bit of a backstory on what really inspired and what really motivated you to get in shape and adapt this healthy and fit lifestyle?
So originally I trained as a professional dancer, so that's what I did sort of growing up. I did that as a job, and then when I stopped, I wanted a more stable career. I sort of didn't do anything, so I didn't do any exercise. It was such a dramatic change from going all of them hours of training to nothing. I looked for classes around here. I didn't really find anything I wanted to, that I really got into. And then I went to the gym and just really got into it. Just straight away, I was like, I've got my routine. So I've actually only really been into it, so I'd say about a year and a half, maybe 2 years. So fairly newish. But yeah, just loved it as soon as I started. So yeah.
And that's so great. And do you think that background in dance has really helped you now that you've made the transition into bodybuilding, just sort of building up a lot of those body parts that you do need for bodybuilding?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're so different, but there's similarities as well. So you still need the same discipline. I missed the routine. Obviously, body wise, I had to work a lot on my upper body because with dance I didn't sort of have any upper body. Um, I had a good like overall athletic start, but I didn't have that shape as such that I wanted.
Well, and I always say, if you were to walk into a gym with 100 people, there's 100 different ways as to how those people got into shape just because, I mean, it depends on their diet, their nutrition, how many reps they do, what exercises they do. So many little things add up to the overall package that people end up seeing. Was that a struggle for you, sort of figuring out what worked best for your body when you got started? Just because I always say, if you're to walk up to someone and say, hey, what did you train for this body part? It looks amazing. What works best for them 99% of the time is not going to work as good for you.
Yeah, so at first I would just literally sort of wander around. I didn't really know what I was doing, just try things that I'd seen sort of maybe on Instagram. And then I asked one of the trainers, can you sort me a plan out? And that's sort of when I started to realise what works well for me and that sort of thing in my weak areas. But also mixing it up. I think your body, it likes to be shocked and mixed up a little bit to keep improving.
No, yeah, I always compare it to sort of like being a mad scientist where you're just trying to sort of like concoct your own potion and sort of figuring out, what works best for you. And it's so much trial and error. I mean, I cannot stress enough how much trial and error really it goes into, figuring out what works best for you. But another question that I love to ask all of my guests that I have on for health and fitness wise is that, I mean, everyone always has that one body part when they get started that really, really takes off that they don't have to train as much. And then everyone also has that one body part that just sort of lags behind that they have to train into overdrive just to get it to catch up to make it look like, they have everything's a little bit more evened out. I mean, I'll give you my examples first. I mean, my back, I had jobs all throughout college of when, I was working in warehouses where, I mean, you either got a really nice back loading packages into trucks or you quit. But I'm also 6'3", so I mean, my legs and my lower body are just shot where, I mean, I basically have to train them into overdrive just to get them to look like any
Yeah.
semblance like I work out at all. I mean, I still have friends when I go to the gym that still tease me and they just say, hey, Ryan, you plan on training legs at all sometime this year? And then I'm just like, oh, okay, come on, guys. Yeah, come on, guys. But what were those body parts for you when you were getting started?
So I was the opposite. My legs had a massive head start. So I'd done a lot of ballet from a young age. So even now, I never train my calves ever, because I have calves. I don't know where they came from. And it was my upper body. So I had zero shoulders at all. I used to do them like twice a week for months and months and months before I saw anything. Whereas my legs, I backed off. Um, I'm quite quad dominant as well. If I train them a lot, they sort of come out of nowhere. So I had to back off them as well. Whereas my upper body, at one time, I was doing 4 upper bodies to one leg day. So
I always say calves are my number one pet peeve just because that is the number one genetic thing where, I mean, you're either kind of born without them or you're not. I mean, I always say I could inject pure muscle into my calves and they wouldn't grow. I mean, I don't know. I'm just one of those people where it's just naturally, I mean, it's such a pain for me. But yeah, that's why I love having our guests come on and share their, separate stories because it's so fascinating to see just how
yeah.
many different people's body parts affect them. But how long into your journey specifically before you decided that you wanted to do a show and then try competing? How long was that?
So I'd already, it's always fascinated me. I don't know why, but as soon as I came into the gym, there's like this wall of inspiration. I saw all these people, but I didn't sort of tell anyone for ages that it's what I wanted to do because I didn't have that, body at the time. So I just worked really hard, and that was always my plan. And then actually, the owner of the gym said, "You've come on loads," and I said, "Well, actually, I really want to compete. I've been thinking about it." So I'd say about a year, before I even, I'd always followed these people on Instagram and that sort of thing. So yeah,
And that's just so inspiring, just figuring out, that you'd always had that deep down, that desire that you wanted to do this, and that you've finally been able to do it. But I always say too, I mean, if you were to poll the general public, 95% of people would not have the determination and the willpower to get into shape to be able to go on a prep, because I always say just to be able to go on a prep you have to be in such a great amount of shape that, I mean, so many people aren't able to achieve that. But then when you go on a prep, I mean, you are notching things up to an extreme where, I mean, everything has to be perfect. I mean, you got to get all of your meals done and on time, and you got to eat them on time. I mean, you got to get all of your workouts in. I mean, everything just becomes so scientific and so exact. What was that adjustment like for you when you went into this lifestyle then where everything just became so strict and so minute and to the point?
yeah. Well, it's such a massive change for me because I'd never dieted really before I got into this gym lifestyle. I've never been one to diet. I've always had quite fast metabolism, so I've just eaten anything that I wanted all the time, takeaways. Um, but actually, it really suits me, so I feel so much better. Um, and it's sort of really ingrained in like a lifestyle now. So I'm just, yeah. I don't really think it's that bad. I think people go in with the mindset, oh, it's going to be, hell. But if you go in with that mindset, then it probably will be. So yeah,
Well, one thing that I found out with bodybuilding too is that it's so much more mental than it is physical, especially the challenge that it has to come through. So, like you said, yeah, if you go in mentally and are just like, hey, this is not going to be as bad as I thought, that is going to help you out vastly more than if you're going in there saying, oh, this is going to be such a drag, this is going to be like a living hell trying to go through this whole
yeah,
prep. So, yeah, the mental aspect is one thing that I cannot preach enough. That, I mean, if you have that mental game down, I mean, the physical game, it becomes
that's the
so much
easy
easier.
part,
Yeah.
definitely.
Oh, absolutely. But one of the things that I would have never guessed in a million years is probably the hardest thing, if not one of the hardest thing for so many of these competitors that I have on, and I don't think the general public would guess that as well, is the posing. I mean, I always say, I mean, I never would have guessed that in a million years. But now I always got to compare it to, I mean, being a great driver, where, I mean, you can be a great driver. You can never be a perfect driver. You can be a great poser. You can never be a perfect poser. It's always ever evolving. What has your experience with posing been like?
Um, so I have a dance background, so I think as it's a tiny advantage because sort of with posture and things. But I am very particular. So as soon as I knew I wanted to compete, I went to a posing coach. I got the basics because I didn't know what was for my category. And then during prep, I literally practiced all the time. So film myself, and because you see people, because when I went to watch my first show as well, you saw some amazing, amazing physiques. But if you don't display it properly, then And it's such a shame when you've done all the work to get to it. So I knew that I didn't want that to be me. So
I mean, I always love to give the example of, I mean, you could be the most in shape person on the planet, and if you don't know how to pose, I mean, good luck to you. But it's just that's just a really fascinating thing for me that, I mean, a lot of people don't realize. But out of your poses that you have to do, what is your favorite pose and what is your least favorite pose?
um so there's front on with arms overhead,
Yep.
the twisted one. I'd say that was my favourite. My least favourite would probably be just the front one, the front figure pose. It's grown on me, but when I first started doing it, it just looked funny. I was like wonky somehow. So
Well, see, I think you guys do it a little bit different because, like, our figure, they don't have to do
yeah,
like a bicep flex, and you guys have to. So, I mean,
all right.
that's a little different. I think with the figure girls here, they just have to do like the turns, kind of like you're talking about, like the front, and then they do like the quarter turn,
Yeah, they
then they do
do.
the
We
quarter
do
turn.
our quarter turns where
Yep.
everything's lower, and then we do them all overhead as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so
Oh,
I always found that fascinating, and then I think the Australians do it a tad bit differently too. I'm not really specific on how much different that is, but yeah, I always do find that fascinating. But then also another thing with the posing that, I mean, a lot of people don't realize that for a lot of these posing sessions, I mean, you guys are more sore than you are from most of your workouts, just because the body is not designed to be flexed intense for that long of a time, and then especially when you're on stage too. I mean, we've had guests where I had a guest where her last name started with a B, so obviously she's going to be one of the first ones to be called out when it comes to the final, pose down, where I mean, she was waiting for 45 minutes because everyone else had to go after her, and I mean, it's just like it's not designed to be like that, because we've heard so many stories of people who, like the day after, they're more sore than they've ever been in their entire life, just because, it's just so hard. But one of the things that, I mean, I hate to talk about, but it's just because, as you can see, I'm one of the palest people that you'll ever meet in your entire life. I mean, being from or having a lot of Norwegian blood in me, I always like to say, you're not gonna be able to be out in the sun for an extended period of time without getting either burnt to an absolute crisp, or you get
yeah,
farmer's tan, which is not a real tan. I always like to say that, but I mean, that's the closest that I'll ever really get to a tan. But bodybuilders get to get tan. What is that experience like for you when you get to put that tan on? And we hear so many stories about, how you see muscles that you never even knew that you had. Everything really seems
yeah.
to pop out. What is that feeling like for you?
Well, I'm also really, really pale. I never fake tan. So yeah, it was when my friends saw me, they just laughed because it was so different. I was just ridiculously dark. But yeah, it definitely makes such a difference. You suddenly see lines and you're like, ooh. So yeah, I might tan more often now. But it was a nightmare to get off as well. It's literally like honestly over a week to get off of just scrubbing at it.
Well, I always say too, another big misconception is that, I mean, you can't really stand on anything. You can't really sit against anything. I mean, you got to bring your own bed sheets a lot of times when you go to these shows. I mean, you are not, I mean, it's not as good as it makes the competitors look. I mean, there's so many back draws with it there too. But for
Yeah.
for your competitions, do you have to wear high heels?
Yeah.
What has that experience been like for you? Because we have some people who have, had a really rough time with that.
Um, I felt okay with them to be honest. I did practice, but yeah, no, it was all right. It was fine, but I know some people don't like heels.
I was gonna say probably the biggest mistake that I've made on this podcast is that I had a girl from Texas down in the South in the US, and I asked her if she had had any experience in high heels before then, and she said, child, please, I've been born in high heels. So, and I realized all the girls from the South that I've talked to,
Yeah,
they're basically born in high heels. So I mean, they have no problem in them whatsoever. So whenever I have someone who's not from the South on, I gotta ask that question. But when they're from the South, I sort of let that question slide. But I mean, it's just, I just find it so fascinating that they, you guys have to wear high heels too, because it's like, don't these people,
yeah,
haven't these people gone through enough with their preps and everything? It's like,
with
come
all
on.
the gym and everything, and
Yeah.
then it's totally different, isn't it? It's
Yep.
like no makeup for months and gym clothes, nothing else, trainers, and then all of a sudden you're all sparkly. But yeah, it sounds silly, but when I grew up, when I was a kid, I used to walk on my toes. So I think that's where my calves came from actually. But also I can walk in heels now. So
Well, I was gonna say with the dancing background too, and you got to sometimes do. And when you said you did a little ballet too, I mean, it's like, yeah, that's basically.
Oh, we're always on our toes,
Yeah,
yeah.
you're always on your toes. So yeah, that does have to be a great big benefit as well. But one of the questions that I ask, all of my guests, whether they be, my up and coming bands and musicians or the health and fitness guests for my bands, I always like to ask, what is that feeling like when you get to go on stage and perform live in front of, hundreds of thousands of people? That also applies to the bodybuilders that I have on the show. What is that feeling like for you when you get to go on stage and, show off all of that hard work that you've worked months upon months for?
It's honestly the best feeling, and I can completely see why people want to do it again and again. At first, I wasn't sure if it was going to be something I'd keep doing. It was something I wanted to tick off, but honestly, the buzz that you get on stage, it was just amazing. And all that work, it's just such like I said, like a sense of achievement. Um, yeah, I was so happy. Honestly, it was like literally one of the happiest days I've ever had, which sounds really cheesy, but it was.
Do you think that your background as a dancer has really helped you too with the nerves that you might get when you're on stage as a bodybuilder?
I think so, yeah. Um, I know some people were literally shaking, so with nerves, but I was, I don't know, I just, like in real life, I'm quite sort of, calm, people don't realise, but then on stage, you're like a different person, aren't you? I just feel like sometimes that I'm meant to be on stage, so I just enjoyed it.
Well, I kind of say you have like your own persona kind of as well, sort of that you
Yeah,
like to take on when
that's
you're
what I meant, yeah.
when you're on stage. Yeah, we hear that so many times. But when you're on stage, does time really seem to speed up, or does it seem to slow down?
You're kind of in your own little bubble in a way. But yeah, no, it went quite fast, yeah. Didn't feel like you were there very long.
Yeah, and I mean that's another thing too. That I mean, all that hard work and all that sacrifice that you guys put into these preps. That I mean, sometimes you're only on stage for like a minute or so, sometimes, and
Yeah,
it's just so. I
it's
mean,
crazy really, isn't
yeah,
it? Yeah.
all of that hard work just for that short amount of time. But what was that experience like when they announced your name and you realized that you were the overall champion at your show that you did in June? What was that experience like?
So I absolutely was not expecting it, and I just stood there and I looked down the line at who had won, and I was just lucky I just stood there. Um, it's being filmed, but you can't see my reaction, and all my friends, they said, "I wish we got your reaction because it was so genuine, like, I was so shocked." I just wasn't expecting it at all.
Yeah. And that's just so great because I mean, and was this your first show that you've done?
Yeah.
And that's even great too. I mean that you won your first show. That's just so awesome. But do you have any what are your other plans? Do you have any plans of competing soon, or are you just going to take a break for a while? What do you have any plans?
No, I'm on prep now. I'm doing I'm doing the finals in 10 weeks,
In 10
so,
weeks. Yeah.
mhm.
Well, where are the finals at?
Hull, which is
Oh,
not too far. So for my last one, I travelled quite far, but the finals are actually closer, so
well, that's great, and we wish you nothing but the best of luck in
thank
that.
you.
But a question that I always love to ask: what is your go-to post-show meal, or what did you have last show as your
Oh,
post-show meal?
oh, it was amazing. So I had a pizza because, oh, just think of pizza so much, and prosecco and brownie.
Where'd you get? Is there any specific place that you got your pizza from that you recommend?
Well, it was just somewhere around here.
Oh.
Actually, I wanted to get a Domino's and they wouldn't deliver here, which was ridiculous. So anyway, so I found somewhere else.
I always said if I ever competed, I would just go to like a Five Guys burger and fries and just like take out $1,000 and just be like, hey, I'm buying you out for the night. I'm either gonna die, pass out, or throw up, but either way, I am getting my money's worth. That's what I always said. But one thing that I really love to talk about on this podcast because it's not talked about as much, I think, as it should be when it comes to the competitions is that I mean, so many people in the general public don't realize that you guys are not able to maintain that look 24/7 that you guys put on stage. I mean, I think partly it's because, some people they might see these photographs that are posted online, they might think that, like, "Oh, hey, they must look like that, 24/7." And another thing too, I think is a lot of these weight loss shows, especially the ones that we have over here in the states, like The Biggest Loser, where I mean, these people lose, hundreds of pounds and they're able to keep it off. Some of them are. We think that then that also applies to the bodybuilders, where it's like, if you guys have worked this hard to, get in shape for the show, you must be able to look like that, year round. But that is not the case. I mean, you're gonna have to put on some weight. I mean, and believe me, there are people that have tried to, keep that and maintain that look, but I mean, it's going to shorten their careers, or it's going to have disastrous effects. Now, I do have to add a disclaimer. There are some genetic freaks that we've had on that are just naturally, a little bit more leaner and a little bit more toned, so that they can, maintain that look a little bit more. But it's not going to happen. They're the 0.001 percenters that are just absolutely just rare, and I mean, they're not the norm at all. But what was that experience like for you when you realized that, like, hey, this look that I've had, I mean, I'm not going to be able to maintain it. And especially now that you're going on prep for another show, just having to maintain that again, and just realizing that, like, hey, once I'm done with this show, I mean, I'm not going to be able to look as good as I looked on that stage for a vast amount of time, probably.
Well, if I'm honest, I think I've got quite a good body image view. So when my body went back to normal, I was fine, because to keep that, it's so much work, and I'm not afraid of the work, but also it's the other things that comes with it, the social side. If you're keeping that physique year round, then you're not going to have any kind of life,
Hmm.
realistically, unless obviously you're a genetic freak, like you said. Um, so for me, I don't mind being a little bit softer. I feel like I did it, I can do it again. So, you know,
That's so important, I think, to have that body image positivity, just because we've had so many guests that talk about, like, how they get depressed, they get a little anxious just realizing
yeah,
that. But and also with the social life too, it's like you got to be able to go out every once in a while and, enjoy yourself, have some food, for God's sake. So,
yeah.
yeah.
And food is really good. Like, you can't never have anything.
Yeah, if I ever had the choice between, especially in the winters that we have here in Minnesota, where it can get very, 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 like, extreme cold, if I had the choice between having a six pack that I have to keep covered up, or enjoying a nice pizza, I'd take the pizza, any day of the week, basically.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's one thing. And also, I always like to say, it's just like starting a business where you got to spend money to make money. You got to put on weight if you want to put on muscle. I mean,
Yeah, definitely.
it's something that has to go hand in hand. But now, two of the questions that I love to ask all of my guests that I've had on that are health and fitness guest wise. I mean, for me, there have been so many positive things that have happened ever since, I got into shape and really started getting bigger and stronger and adapting this healthy and fit lifestyle. But the one negative thing for me, at least, is you're going to get asked to move a lot of people's furniture. You're going to get asked to open a lot of pickle jars or bottled water, or anything that's like really held on tight, or, really on
Yeah.
tight. I'm still at home with my parents for the next couple of months before I move out, and every single time that they come home with groceries, I basically have to lift the car into the driveway and carrying the groceries, being the good son that I am. But has that been a similar experience with you, where people just take one look at you now and they just assume that you can do favors for them?
Well, it's funny because everyone's seen like my pictures and things from my show, so they're always like, "Oh, Kerry, you can do this." Like, "Oh, she's hench." I'm like, "I'm really not hench." But
Okay, we've heard of British slang now, so what does hench mean? What's that?
oh, hench is like,
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, so that's the first time that we've ever heard the word hench on the
"Oh,
podcast. So
really?
so yeah, I've
Oh,
never
yeah." It's
I've never heard. So you
everyone says
guys,
it here.
we learned something
Like
new.
Judy Hench. That's one.
Yeah.
You know Judy Dench.
Yeah.
You say Judy Hench. Judy Hench.
Judy Dench has been working out a lot, apparently.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, hench now. So I got to write that down now. So that we heard a new British slang thing right now. So yeah, I got to figure out what the American version of that is. Well, probably just because, like, we say yoked. I'd say a lot, like, oh, that person's yoked, kind of like an egg or
Oh,
something.
I've
So,
not heard of
yeah,
that.
that's one. So that's probably like the American version
I'm
of
gonna use
hench.
that.
Then,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You say, yeah, if you see someone walking down the street and they look really in shape, you just go, oh yeah, that person's yoked, basically. So, yeah, that's what we like to say. But yeah, I mean, I always say, being 6'3", it's a double-edged sword for me, just because, I could have zero muscle at all and they'd be like, oh yeah, tall guy, come over and help me move. But yeah, I take it with pride now. But now, probably my favorite question to ask, and the audience favorite, I think, is, it's $1 million idea. I always say it's gotten better, as time has gone on, especially with like Instagram and all the other apps that people have. But when it comes to clothes for fit women, I always say, your clothing options can be very limited, especially when you're on prep and when you're in your off season. You basically have to have two separate wardrobes.
Yeah, definitely.
What have been some ways that you have found that you're able to compensate for the fact that your clothing options can be limited?
So I get like the stretchy jeans. I can't get normal jeans because my my calves don't fit
I
in.
was about to say that. Yep.
um, so yeah, stretchy jeans, but then obviously when you're in prep, everything hangs off you. So yeah, I didn't really buy any new clothes when I was in prep, especially near the end. I tried a few things on, and you just look awful in normal clothes. It's really weird. You just look, you know,
I know it's I kind of like to compare it to like it's sometimes like those weight loss things where like people wear their old clothes that they used to wear when they were a little bit heavier, and then they just like saying now that's like with prep clothes basically. Yeah.
and even my gym clothes would literally be just hanging like a massive space on my waist. And so, but that's when you know that you're losing, because you don't always see it, do you, until your clothes are massive for you.
Well, and that's the thing too, because I mean, I always say it's so different when you've lost the weight and you like run into maybe someone that you haven't seen for an extended period
Yeah,
of time, and then they're like, "Oh wow, you look amazing," as opposed to you're seeing that change every day, so it's not you're not really able to see
yeah,
it that well. So
yeah.
yeah, that's another thing. And again, I always say, I had two fashion people come on the podcast, and I told them, I said, I have all these guests that would love to have it if you made like some fit options for people in shape, and they haven't gotten back to me yet. But again, you guys get on that, because like you said, we got another person on here that I mean, looking for clothes for fit people. But probably the biggest myth that I love to bust on this podcast, and we talked about it briefly before we got started here. And I mean, I always say it's gotten better the last 5 years due to Instagram, but there are just still a significant amount of women that have that fear where if they walk into the gym and they pick up one weight, they do one bicep curl or one anything that has to do with anything with working out, they're just basically going to put on 50 pounds, or I don't know how many kilograms that is in translation of muscle, but it's not going to be the truth at all. I mean, I mean, and I always say, if it does happen, first of all, give me a call. I'll be the first person they talk. I will spend my entire life savings just to talk to you for like 5 minutes just to figure out what you did. But also, it's just such a weird thing that I think really needs to be debunked. And did you have that fear when you were getting started? But even if you didn't, I mean, I bet you hear that all the time now. Still, how do you like to respond to that?
Yeah, there's still, I think it's getting better, but there's still that thought, especially even people that don't really even train, there's that thought. But it's the opposite. I'm happier with my body now than I ever have been. Um, and it just does, so like for women, you get your bum goes up, and what's not to like? Everyone needs to do
Well,
it.
I honestly, that's what I hopefully that's what this podcast that I can just help convince,
Yeah,
like one person a podcast, but it's just so wrong. And I always like to tell the story of when I was in college. I had a really good friend who she came up to me and she said, like, Ryan, I'm seeing all these changes that you're making with your body, and I want to go to the gym with you, but I'm just afraid that I'm going to get too bulky. And I told her, I said, listen, the amount of weight that you carry in your purse when we go out to the clubs or when we go out to get something to eat, she had a very heavy purse. I had no idea what was in that thing. I don't know if she had like a dead body in there, like if a sorority sister made her really mad one day. I mean, it was like a 20-pound purse. I don't know, what that. So I told her, I said, you are lugging that thing around 24/7 and you are not getting an ounce of muscle. And that sort of convinced her. Well, then she's like, oh, yeah. And then that really, helped her go to the gym, and she loved it. And I mean, I always say it's just give it a try. What is the worst thing that's going to happen? But going off of that, I always like to say this is one thing that I think affects women so much more than it does men positively, is just that confidence boost that working out gives you. I mean, we've
yeah,
heard
definitely.
so many stories on this podcast of women who, have, made life-changing decisions, or just that overall added boost of happiness that working out gives them. What has that confidence boost been like for you, and how have you used that in order to affect other aspects of your life? Because I always say that confidence boost is one thing that you can take from your life and use it to impact everything else in your life.
Yeah, definitely. So, as cheesy as it sounds, the gym has actually changed my life. So before that, because obviously I'd stopped my dancing, career-wise, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I was a bit lost. I was going out a lot. I was drinking a lot. I got into the gym. I'm just so level-headed now. I've started a new career, so I'm going into nursing. It's just changed my life completely in a good way.
I was just about to ask you that, because you said it says that you're a student nurse. What inspired you to get into nursing?
Um, so when I was 18, so a long time ago, I first worked in care, loved it. A lot of people said, "Oh, you're really natural at it. Have you thought about going into nursing?" But this is when I was dance training, so I did all that first, travelled, got all that out of my system, and it's just something I've always wanted to do. I absolutely love it. So I finally sort of took the plunge to retrain. So I'm 28, so I'm not young, but I'll be qualified when I'm 30. So I think that's a good age, really.
Another benefit of working out, she doesn't look a day over 21, everyone. So,
Oh,
yeah. Well, I just turned 25 myself a couple of weeks ago. So, I'm starting to get that oldish bug where I'm just like, oh God, I'm starting to slowly get up there. But yeah, I mean, again, that's just so inspiring. But also being a nurse, I always love to say, because we've had a few nurses on the podcast before, that, I mean, when you see all the stuff that you see normally with nursing, where you might see people that, have been dealt a rough hand in life, they might be out of shape. How much more does that add to your inspiration to inspire you to keep going into the gym and keep up with this lifestyle, knowing that, I mean, you are blessed and you're a healthy and strong individual. And when you see people that might not have been dealt the best hand in life, how much more do you use that to add to your fire, basically, to keep this going?
yeah, definitely. So I think the most important thing that you're given is your health. So I see obviously a lot of poorly people all the time. You just need to look after yourself. You've been given this body. Um, and people, it's not everyone's fault, but you can make wrong choices and things, and it impacts you later in life. And I just want to sort of live the best life that I can. And I feel that that's what I'm doing by doing this. So,
And that is so awesome. And do you think also that, like I said, this background in nursing has really helped you when it comes to sort of figuring out, like we were talking about before, like what works best for your body when it comes to working out?
yeah,
Do you really think that the background in nursing has really helped you sort of find out more about what nutritional wise or other things that might be more beneficial to you?
yeah. So everything to do with the body interests me. So yeah, it definitely helps. Knowing how your body works, sort of what's good for you, hormones, how they can fluctuate, so everything like that definitely helps. Yeah.
What would you say is probably the biggest nutritional change that you've had to make since you started your health and fitness journey?
Um, just eating properly. So even when I first started training, I still wasn't eating properly, so I wasn't really seeing the results. So energy for me, it's energy since I switched my diet. Everything sleep. I actually years ago I used to have issues sleeping. I don't have any of that now. I don't really have any like worry or anything. I used to be quite a worrier. So I just in general, it's all sort of come together really.
Okay, you're kind of like Nostradamus because you predicted this is like the third time that you predicted basically what I'm going to ask you next, because
All
I
right.
always say that, we were talking about this before, like the most posh British guy I've ever had on my entire
Yeah.
podcast. I mean, he was from Oxford and he was a sleep specialist. And we were talking about, like the benefits of sleep. And especially because I told him, I said, like I have a lot of people that, are really into shape on the podcast. And we talked a little bit about that, like how that really helps with muscle recovery. And you said you had some problems with sleep before. How did you fix that? And do you have any tips and tricks for people out there who are looking to, be able to get that proper amount of sleep? Because so many people, especially with this day and age with technology, it's so hard for so many people to get the proper amount of sleep.
Yeah, I think with sleep, it is switching off, winding down. Like I said, I just used to have a lot on my mind all the time, and I'm just sort of organised myself better now. So I don't really have worries as such because everything's sort of all organised, if that makes sense. I'd say getting a good diet. So actually, at the very end of prep, I would say I didn't sleep as well because your carbs help you sleep definitely. That's a nice excuse to eat some carbs. Um, just relax, look after yourself, self care. So they say, have a nice bath or something like that. Wind down. Don't sit on your phone because that keeps you up as well.
I gotta say, I will admit I'm one of those guys where I have a bath every once in a while, just because I have a job where, I can sweat up a storm, especially being in a warehouse where it can be up to like 110 degrees in there, Fahrenheit. So I don't know how much that is Celsius, but it's very, very hot. So I'll have a bath. But yeah, the sleep aspect I cannot stress enough, because I'm one of those people where, I mean, if I get like 4 hours of sleep or less, I almost cannot work out. Where it's just like I can't. It's just my body just can't
It's
function
so
like that.
important.
Yeah. And I always say there's not a better feeling in the world, or there almost isn't a better feeling in the world, than after you've had such a long, hard day of training and you go home and you get that proper amount of sleep. Let's say you get like that 8 hours in or whatnot. and you feel out, you wake up like a superhero basically. I mean, you just feel so well rested and so, I mean, yeah, there's not much better than that. But now we go on to our audience favorite and my personal favorite part of the podcast, a little questionnaire where we're going to ask Kerry here about a half a dozen or so health and fitness questions that we ask all of our other guests and see how her answers stack up to everyone else that we've had on. So for our first question, what is one item that you always need to have in your fridge?
Um, I would say almond milk. I know that's really boring.
That, hey, there's nothing born.
Is this when I'm on prep?
It can be either way. You can do either way.
Well, no, it's there all the time,
Yeah.
so yeah, almond milk.
Well,
Yeah.
I was gonna say though, that's only. I mean, you're gonna be like our 150th bodybuilder or health and fitness guest that we've had on, and almond milk has been the answer probably about 4 or 5 times. So
Yeah,
it's
I
not that
get really
popular of an
upset
answer.
when it's not there, when you open
Yeah.
the fridge, I'm like, "Oh,
Can I
yeah,
say I have never tried almond milk a day in my life, and I've always wanted to just to give it a try. So I'm on it. I'm gonna be completely honest. I was gonna go to the grocery store right after I was done talking with you, so I might actually have to go and buy some, just a little bit of it, just in case I didn't like it,
yeah."
and just try it out because that seems really fascinating to me. But for me, I mean, it's always got to be probably chicken. I mean, it's something that I always got to have in
Well,
my
yeah, I do have chicken all the time mainly,
yeah.
yeah.
I used to have eggs all the time, but I got to a point where I was eating eggs so frequently that I mean, digestion wise, it was not working out for me. It was not becoming a thing. So you gotta be careful with that as well. But now, out of all of your followers that you have on Instagram, what would you say would probably be one thing that they would be most shocked and surprised about you to find out about you if they met you in person?
Um, oh God, let me think. Sorry.
No worries at all.
I'm trying to think. Uh, I'm stuck.
Would it maybe be because like you were talking about before that like you were maybe not as outgoing as you might seem like on your
Yeah,
Instagram?
I'm quite shy. I think people think that I'm because I, on stage
Mhm.
and stuff. Probably that I'm quite shy in real life. Yeah,
No, that's
yeah.
one. Yeah, that is one that we hear all
I
the
was trying
time.
to think of something really like interesting.
Oh no, that's interesting enough as it is, but too because I think so many times with people they think that another reason why I love to have these Instagram people on is because with Instagram you're not really able to get the backstory for so many of these people where you just see them and you kind of think that you know them where it's like deep down you don't know them at all really where you're just like oh I feel like I really connect with them but then you're like when you meet them in real life they might not be the most outgoing. They might be a little bit more shy. Like with me too, when I'm done with this podcast, I mean, I have a job too where I communicate constantly with people as a supervisor where after that, I mean, it's like don't talk to me basically where it's just because I am just talked out, I'm tuckered out. So yeah, I totally understand that 100%. But now if someone were to come up to you and say, we made the decision, you can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding or the health and fitness lifestyle in general, we can do both. What would be one thing that you would like to see changed?
Um, I think I would like to see change. I think there's a lot of stigma, and people think because you're into bodybuilding, you put on a little bikini and you're half naked, then you're really vain, and that it's quite a superficial thing. For me, it's like so much more than that. It's all about the discipline, the routine, the health and lifestyle part. But I think people think that it's just about you wanting to get your abs out and
No, yeah,
prance around a bit.
I've heard that so many times too, and it just that's why, like I said too, that's why I love to include the questions of like what was that prep like, what was that because so many people they just think that oh you guys just go to the gym and that's it. They don't realize the diet. They don't realize how just so scientific and how minute everything has to be when you're going on a prep just to get into the shape for these shows. They only see I like to compare it sort of to like an iceberg where they only see probably about like 10% of what goes into it whereas the other 90% is the stuff that people don't really post about or they don't like to talk about all the social life that you miss out on a lot of the time. I mean just it's just so I mean part of the reason why I started this podcast is to sort of bring that to light. What these competitors, male or female, what they go through in order to get that look that they have on stage. Because, like I said, when I was in college, I made a few friends that people that did do that, and just seeing what they went through, I was like, wow, a lot of people don't realize, so much of this. So that's again, if people could break that stigma, I think that'd be really important too as well. But now, what is your favorite body part to train and least favorite body part to train?
I would say my favourite is glutes, which is probably most girls' favourite. Um, Worst would be probably I did grow to like them, but shoulders again, just because I'm always at them. I just feel like every day is shoulder day for me.
Well, keep at it because I always say, there'll be that one day when you finally realize, okay, they finally caught up to everything where I can,
Yeah.
take it down a notch. But now, if we were to talk to you a year from today, what were some
hmm
goals that you'd like to have achieved whether it comes to, your bodybuilding or whether it just comes to your overall life? What are some goals that you would like to have accomplished if we were to talk to you a year from today?
So I will have done the finals, and then after I just want to get really, really strong. So I've got loads of goals for after I compete, because obviously when you're cutting down, you can't really make much progress in terms of strength goals and things because you're just getting smaller. So yeah, I've got big plans to sort of get really strong as possible for me, obviously. And then yeah, I am going to compete again. So I'm going to have a good sort of off season and then pick a show when I'm ready, when I've improved what I want to improve.
Well, and plus you'll be getting close to the holiday season too. After this show, so
Yeah.
you got to enjoy yourself
Oh,
during that.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely go out and have some fun. But now I love to ask this question for guests that we have on that are not from the U.S. because we have a lot of international guests. The most international guests I've had on, I think I've had probably like 30 Canadians, which let's be honest, they're not really that international guests. They're like just right across the border. But what would you say is probably a big misconception that people in the UK have about Americans?
Uh,
I always find
that
this fascinating.
that you everything's supersized.
Well, that's true.
Oh, is it true?
Hang on. Yeah, give me literally 1 second. I'm going to show you something real quick. Okay. So last night I went to a convenience store to go and get, it's basically like a freezy, which is like a sugared, like a flavored drink or whatever. And this is the size cup that they gave.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
Why?
I'll go out for more to size.
Yeah,
Yeah.
why? It's bigger than your head.
Yeah. No. Yeah. It's huge. And it was only $1. So it was, yeah, it was, yeah. So I can totally agree. See, like as you can see, it's an XXL cup, an
Yeah,
extra
they're
extra
shrinking
large.
everything about us. You know, like chocolate bars and
hmm
everything. They've all shrunk. So ours are getting smaller.
Yep, yep. Well, I can actually totally agree. That stereotype is 100% true. I can verify that as an American on this podcast. I always like to say there's a place here too called Smash Burger where you go there and the burgers are so big that they literally touch the plate when they're like they come out of the bun and they touch the plate. That's how big they are. But I always say the portion size. I've never been to another country, but we have a lot of people come on and they talk about how they've come to the States and they realize that the portions are just out of control, and I
Yeah.
couldn't
The
agree with that more.
Cheesecake Factory
Yep.
in America. I went there and it was,
What part of the U.S. did you go to?
well, I've been to Florida a few times. I love Florida, and I've been to Vegas as well.
Florida, as we like to call it, the redheaded stepchild of the U.S. Kind of everything bad that happens in Florida. I've been to Florida once, so we went there for a baseball spring trip in high school. I was surprised by all the little geckos that they got running around, all the little lizard things that they got
Oh
running
yeah,
around. I was totally shocked by that, and I saw an alligator too in the wild, and I was like, okay, yeah, that's creepy. I don't want to mess with that, but. Yeah, and I've never been to Vegas, but I've always wanted to go there because where I'm from, the gambling age is 18, so and Vegas is 21, so I've never really had that urge to go, but I've always wanted to go to Vegas and check that
yeah,
out.
it's good.
But now, lastly, if you could go back in time and talk to the 18-year-old version of yourself, what would be the best piece of advice you would give her?
Oh, I would just say believe in yourself. I was just really hard on myself all the time, and I had so much potential in all sorts, and I just didn't believe in myself. So yeah, totally changed from that aspect. But I would probably say that, yeah.
Absolutely. And the last two questions of the podcast that I love to ask all of our guests. I mean, there's so many things when it comes to people starting their health and fitness journey that a lot of people, I'm one of those OCD people where if I'm starting a new workout routine, it's got to start on a Monday because it's the very beginning of the week. It's got to be at like a round number. So if it's like at 1 o'clock and if it's like 1:05, I'm not going to be able to work out until like 1:15 or 1:20, or it's got to be like a round number like that. I'm kind of a little OCD when it comes to that. But I've always found that with so many people, just walking into the gym it's going to be so hard for them to walk out without getting a workout in, because I mean, it's just getting there for so many people is the hardest part. But do you have any advice for people, or even for my friends that might come up to you and say that, like, hey, I need some advice on, how to get started? What's the really good piece of advice that you like to give them just to get them motivated so that they're willing to, make this drastic change? Because it is a drastic change, but a lot of slow steps really help with that.
Um, I would say, go for it because you never ever regret a workout. So you could be having a rubbish day, instantly you go, it's endorphins, everything. You just feel so much better. But I know it's more habit. Once you get into that habit, then it's much easier. So yeah, just go for it.
I couldn't agree more. And also, if you can have a friend go with you too, because to have that extra support
Yeah,
system
yeah,
is
friends.
so important. But now, is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
Um, I'm gonna shout out then to my coach, Danny. Hi.
All right, we got a shout out there to Danny. And again, we cannot thank you enough for coming on the podcast. It was so great having you on and sharing your journey. And we cannot wish you the best of nothing but the best of luck for your show that you have in 10 weeks. I think you're going to do great. And again, you guys, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.